for one more. Angela Matthews was out of options. After her divorce, she'd lost everything: her savings, her home, and most of her peace of mind. When she found a cheap 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, she didn't hesitate. Sure, the paint was peeling, the pipes groaned, and the rent seemed suspiciously low, but beggars couldn't be choosers. She moved in with her 6-year-old son Danny on a rainy Thursday evening. The landlord, an elderly man named Mr. Grayson, handed her the keys with a crooked grin. "Room for one more," he said, his voice low and raspy. Angela assumed he was talking about the unit's size and brushed it off. The first week passed uneventfully. Angela busied herself with unpacking while Danny explored every corner of their new home. He seemed to like it, especially the small closet in his room. One afternoon, Angela heard Danny laughing. It was the first time he'd laughed like that in months, and it warmed her heart. She peeked into his room and found him sitting on the floor, grinning. "Who are you talking to, buddy?" she asked. "Penny," he replied cheerfully. "She lives here too." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Oh, yeah. What's she like?" Danny tilted his head. "She's nice. She has long black hair and a blue dress. But she says you can't see her." Angela smiled, assuming it was an imaginary friend. Danny had been lonely since the move, and this seemed harmless enough. It didn't feel harmless for long. Danny started talking about Penny constantly. He claimed she liked to play hide and seek, but always cheated by disappearing. Sometimes, Angela would hear him whispering late at night. When she asked about it, he'd shrug and say, "I was talking to Penny." The noises started soon after: creaks in the hall, faint laughter, and what sounded like footsteps pacing above her, even though they were on the top floor. Angela tried to ignore it. Then, there were the neighbors. The building was nearly empty, but the few people Angela saw were strange. There was the man with hollow eyes who stared blankly at the stairwell for hours, and the woman in a faded dress who shuffled through the hallway, muttering under her breath. Whenever Angela tried to greet them, they didn't respond. One night, as she was locking her door, Mr. Grayson appeared behind her. "How's the place treating you?" he asked. "It's fine," Angela said hesitantly. "A little noisy, though." He chuckled. "You'll get used to it. Seen Penny yet?" Angela froze. "Excuse me." He grinned, his yellow teeth gleaming. "Never mind, you will." The breaking point came a week later. Angela woke to Danny screaming. She rushed to his room and found him huddled in the corner, his eyes wide with terror. "She's mad, Mommy," he sobbed. "Penny's mad at me." Angela pulled him into her arms. "Why is she mad?" "She says there's only room for one more," he whispered. Angela's blood ran cold. That night, she packed their bags and drove to a motel. Danny didn't protest. He just kept glancing out the car window, as if expecting someone to follow. The next day, Angela called the police to report the strange noises and people in the building. When they called her back, the officer's voice was grim. "Ma'am, Maplewood Apartments burned down 20 years ago. A fire killed everyone inside. No one's lived there since." Angela's hands shook as she hung up. She looked over at Danny, who was sitting quietly on the motel bed. "She's not gone," he said softly. Angela stared at him. "What do you mean?" "She says she'll find us." In the silence that followed, Angela thought she heard it. A faint, familiar laugh coming from somewhere outside the room.